I think this is the time. Okay, first of all, I thank all of you who have joined. So this is the third seminar as a part of our seminar series. And this time we have Alok from HSBC Department of IIT Gandhinagar. And Alok is going to talk about ornaments of dead among the Nagas. A very interesting topic. So Alok, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Sujit. For last two lecture, we heard about black hole, we heard about biological science, but today in this lecture, I'm not going to talk to you about anything of science, but of humanities, and I'm going to talk to you about a community, about the culture, and the place where we are happy to say there is no corona yet. So COVID will not come to the reference in my class. The first thing what you are seeing is my title is Ornaments of the Dead Among the Nagas. This is a paper which I wrote a decade back or so, but now recently there have been a proposal by a publisher that I should make a monograph out of it. And in last one decade or so, I have collected good amount of data to add into that and develop it into a monograph. What are you seeing in this slide is the first ever sketches, the color sketch, which was done by Colonel Woodruff in 1875. It got published in Royal Aesthetic Society of Bengal, and then people came to know how colorful these people are. What you are seeing is a different kind of nagas, and what you see is that they ornament themselves different than the rest of the world what we see in and around the Naga hills. And another important factor is that they do ornament themselves with those uh, with the material which originates at least about 2,500 kilometers from their land. Whereas we all know that Nagas used to be furious headhunters, then they are known to have not traveled much from the hill. And another characteristic feature when I talk about Naga is people think they are headhunters. So you can see in the lower row there are good number of human heads. And look at the central picture where you see a layer of heads are being there and there are a lot of perforations. And when these perforations were there, for all these years, people thought these perforations would be the mark of the spear because they were headhunters. They used to kill the humans by the with the spear, and these are the marks. So let us leave at this point in this slide. And you also know that people decorate themselves with a lot of ornaments, a lot of tattoos. Why do people ornament? Coming next is then the question comes from where these Nagas came. Why people all around Naga hills, none of them look similar age of Nagas. They don't behave similar age of Nagas. They don't speak the same language as of Nagas. And Naga hill, having a small area, it has got about 22 languages, 300 dialects among themselves. And what you see, the entire Naga hills is divided into Myanmar and this is the Myanmar, which we call the Sagaing districts of Myanmar. And in India, you have today what we are known as Nagaland, Arunachal Pradesh, Manipur, and little bit of Assam. Their distributions are there. And officially, there are 14 groups, but unofficially, there are 22 groups of Nagas. Uh, as a humanities student or a humanities scholar, what interests me is to understand from where Nagas have come, what is their cultural past, and what made them a different cultural lifestyle than what we rest of the people are. So there are many scholars, not only me, there are many scholars who have been working on these aspects, and many of them have given relationship of these Nagas to other places. They do talk about they might have been originated from Solomon Islands, Australia, Papua New Guinea, Indonesia, Philippines, Taiwan, and Borneo. And the factors what they took into consideration for these cultural relations are blackening of the teeth. I wouldn't have a archaeological evidences to see blackening of the teeth among the ancient Nagas. That I cannot evaluate. Then disuse and dislikes of cow's milk. Well, again, that is something for an archaeologist. How do I verify that? Then, like that, what you can read is many factors like making a big earlobes, headhunting and keeping the skull trophies, tattooing the face, communal houses or your dormitories, pile dwelling, double cylinder vertical bellows, beetle chewing, and identical what we commonly known as Indonesian backstrap looms, an elaborate but poor system of irrigated terrace and hills, use of marine cells, large stone sitting platform, and burial custom and death rituals. By the time I started working on Nagas, it was in 1996, and about 96% of Nagas have already become Christians. So the factor which I realized when you become westernized or Sanskritization come into your society, or even you change your religion, what would change the last in human society generally is the customs related to birth or related to death. When you die, you realize, no, whatever the customs practiced for my forefathers, I should do that. Otherwise, his spirit may not rest in the peace. Or when there is a newborn at your home, you again go back to your tradition. Provided you have changed your religion, provided you've done anything, then you go back to your tradition and try to replicate the same. So birth and death during those times, the tradition dies last. Taking that into consideration, I am going to move around to the burial customs and death rituals, and along with that, what are the grave goods? So with that, I will move around with this lecture. And before I go to the lecture, what you are seeing, when you go to Nagaland today, rather I call it Naga Hills, it's a beautiful place. But there have been expedition to the Nagas right from 1830s. It's the picture what you are seeing down here is a house. This is one of the oldest picture taken on Naga Hills. It was taken by Otto Ehler from Ethnology Museum of Berlin, who visited that after Adolf Bastian visited, and he asked him to go around and take the photograph. So this is one of the oldest picture, and what it is written is that house reigns rich and Angami. That says it's a house of a rich Angami. What is rich Angami? This picture is taken in 1893. And what is rich Angami you talk of? This rich Angami mean it's not you are rich in materialistic world, but you are rich in cultural world. What is cultural world? That you have brought required fertility to the village. How do you bring required fertility to the village? Is by bringing enemy's blood to the village and spreading that in the village. So that enemy blood could be in the form of human or could be in the form of a tiger who had attacked your village or your agricultural fields. So in that condition, they call it rich and Angamis. That is rich and is culturally rich. So everything what you are seeing in this house is a story of a 500 year, because this horn what you are seeing on the top of the house, it is you acquired that by giving 7 feast of merit. And this feast of merit is not like you have money and you can give it. Society and your custom should allow you to give feast of merit. For giving each feast of merit, you have to prove yourself that you have brought something good to your village to your society, to your people. And each carving in this house has a 100-year story. And each carving, Nagas, they never had their language, they didn't have their script. And each of these are the script. Only an archaeologist or ethnologist or a cultural anthropologist could go and easily read it and come to know what this village, the past of this village for last 500 years or so. But what is happening these days is what you are seeing this side, this picture is called village Longwa, about which I'll come back sooner. And this is the village, this is the last village of India, which falls between India and Myanmar. What you are seeing is that half of these houses are in Myanmar, half of these houses are in India. But this is the one village called Longwa, and another village about which many of the ethnographers who have interest on Nagas they know is called Khonoma. That village has now changed to all tin roof from the thatch roof, but they still have left a sitting place which was very ancient, and this is a trademark of any chiefdom society. Based on those sitting platforms of big many platforms, people have related these Nagas to Borneo communities. Then the foremost requirement, as I told in the beginning, for understanding history of any region or community is study its cultural material in context. If I want to know the origin of Nagas, my research program remains on to understand migration of Nagas to the Naga
If I want
hills,
to know the
where
origin of Nagas,
archaeologically
my research
there is
program
no
remains on
evidence
the migration
that
of Nagas to the Naga. If I want to know the origin of Nagas, my research program remains on the migration of Nagas to the Naga.
And interestingly, when archaeological work is only of last 2 decades people are doing the archaeological work. Interestingly, you see the northern Nagas, the northern Naga hills, they give you older date than the southern Naga hills, and the difference between southern Naga hills and northern Naga hills is about 2000 years. So that then gives you a hint that probably the migration to the Naga hills by the humans have taken from south, not from north. North is where Dimapur and Kohima are situated. If you are aware about the map of Naga Hill, and Mon, Chipri, those are the region where southern Nagas are there. So archaeologically, it looks people have migrated from south to north, and what has happened is that to understand the history of any region or any community, not only of Nagas, is that you need to study the cultural material in the context. Let it be archaeology, let it be anthropology, let it be ethnoarchaeology. The material should be in the context for me to understand their origin. But the introduction of Innerland Permit, you might have ILP, that started in 1873, which kept the Nagas out of the world knowledge system for generations. And before 1873, hardly any Indians from Plain have gone there to do any anthropological. And this, then at the same time, there was a large scale collection of cultural exhibits in the following periods before the area was closed for outsider in 1947. We all know that in 1947, Naga Hill was closed for any foreigner, even if for any Indian, for up to about 1990 or so. And during those time, what is happened, the repeated burning of the villages have made a void in understanding the history of the Nagas. What is this repeated burning of the village? First is Britishers wanted to inhabit the Naga Hills because of different reason. Let us not discuss over it in this lecture on that, the region. And to do that, to subjugate the Nagas, they burned village after village. And same time, there was a museum movement all around the world, and the ethnology collector would collect material from the village, and then the Britishers have burned. There have been a lot of historical evidence to prove that. And then when India got independent, Nagas wanted their independent country, and the military people, to subjugate the Nagas, they thought few of them are the informant to the Naga insurgent. If you call them Naga insurgent or you call them Naga independent fighters, that's up to you to take a call. But the people who were fighting to have an independent Naga, they burned the village because they doubted some of the villages that those villagers are informant to Indian government, and Indian government thought some of the people are informant to insurgent. So this repetition of burning of the village continued for a century or so. And in this process, at the same time, while the villages are getting burned, the museum collector, like what you are seeing in this picture, see there was a person called Hemindorf who lived there for 7 months in a village in Wakching. So when he left from that village, there were only 700 people living there those days. So when he left from that village, the collection what he did, the ethnographic objects, the objects which could have been of importance to understand the origin or migration of Nagas, they got collected, and you can see the entire line. This line is never-ending line. Each basket contains 10 to 20 cultural objects, and all these objects are now in Ethnology Museum of Vienna. That way, there are about 50,000 objects from Naga Hills moved from Naga Hills to different museums in UK alone, and in Europe and America. There are quite a number of people contributed to that. And 3 groups comprising American missionary, British administrators, and German-speaking anthropologists have worked on this Naga Hills. I made a book on German anthropologists on Naga Hills. Now I'm working on British administrators on the Naga Hills, and this lecture is part of that. And what is burnt is what you are seeing there. Look at these houses. As I told you, each houses are, you don't wear this dress as you like. It's not like that I have money, I would buy a Louis Philippe shirt, or I have money, I would go and buy a Raymond shirt. My society should allow me to buy that or acquire that because I have contributed something to the society. That's the end. Each carving also means that. And what is burned in the process is these houses. And these houses, had those been there, now they are only in the pictures, I would have taken those and tried to understand the affinity, the people who are practicing that all around the world, and would have understood the meaning of those. Because again, the problem with the Nagas is that they don't have a school. But what remains to infer from is these photographs. What are you seeing in this slide are the pictures of the objects which are now stored in the Ethnology Museum of Vienna. And most of these objects were collected by Führer Hemindorf during his visit in 1937. And in most cases, what you see is that they all are made of very exotic material. And you see there is, to the first row right-hand side picture, that is the headgear made of elephant hide. And down that you will see another headgear which is made of tiger skin. And why do people make such exotic headgears or ornaments, and who can wear that? Is there any social hierarchy that this is allowed to certain people and not allowed for rest? In fact, whatever you are seeing, these all are the objects which only a Ong, that means a king, or a person who has brought fertility by showing his power on enemy village can wear those. And in the next slide, what you are seeing again, these objects are stored in the Ethnology Museums in Berlin. And as you all would know, the Ethnology Museum of Berlin is one of the largest anthropological museums of the world. And the shield, you can see one shield which is made of elephant hide, and you see certain ear ornaments which are made of different colors of hairs. They are not different woolen cloth or cotton, but are different color goat's hair. And likewise, you see another headgear on which an hornbill beak is used. And this is again certain objects which does say us that these objects are meant for only certain class of people. And in the following slide, we will see if such objects were ever given to the grave as otherwise we know in almost all the chiefdom societies, the grave carries those objects which that person had used during his lifetime or her lifetime. And where do we get this data from? What you see here, one of the early traveler to the Naga Hills, rather one of the early trained anthropologist traveler to the Naga Hill is by Dr. Adolf Bastian. And Adolf Bastian was the keeper of Ethnology Museum of Berlin, and this is his field note, and this is what he has done during 1878 to 1880, and those data never came to the limelight because just following this, he took interest more in Maya civilization, and all of us know following the discovery of Maya civilization, there was two world war in which Germany was involved, and almost all what he has written in these field notes are in very archaic form of Dutch language, and it is also very difficult to assess those material. And what you see on the right hand side are the set of very early pictures, rather I would say a set of earliest picture taken on Naga Hills. There are actually 130 pictures, but in due course of time, those pictures were taken by Otto Ehler, whom Adolf Bastian sent to the Naga Hill to collect some data and the material in 1892 to 93. And those pictures in last 100 plus years have been stored in a very rolled form. Unrolling those pictures itself is a bigger project. And I couldn't unroll most of them because it required a lot of conservation work and a lot of permission. And so I could unroll only 8 of those. And one of those is so important, what you can see down. When you unroll that, you find a drum, a log drum, which is very common in Nagaland. Almost all the Naga groups, they use the log drums for their day-to-day and festival activities. But a closer look at this log drum, you will find it is shaped as a canoe. Why would some make a log drum in a canoe style when we all know the Nagas, they live in a landlocked area, and for them the nearest sea would be the Bay of Bengal, which is about 2,500 kilometers from their habitat. And we are being told, or we are being exposed, or we have read throughout these years that Nagas, because of their headhunting and different lifestyle, they tend to remain in the hill. So here is a research problem, that which this canoe-shaped drum is something related to their original habitat from where they migrated to Naga Hills. And again, there are some of the old sketches. This sketch is, as you saw in the first sketches, that was done by R.G. Uttrup, and some repository where Naga physical remains are kept. And I am showing you 2 pictures. One is a Petribus Museum in Oxford University, where the more prominent features, more prominent place in the display is given to Naga physical remains or Naga skulls rather than to the Naga culture, their colorful culture. Likewise, when you come to Vienna, the Ethnology Museum, where you could see the speaker standing next to some human skulls collected probably by Führer Hemmendorf and kept in the museum. And these skulls have got no human evolution importance, but they are kept there. So maybe down the line, one would, or we should try to repatriate these physical remains back to Naga Hills. And at the moment, I keep my talk limited to only the issue of their origin. If at all, such skull could give us any clue for their original habitat area from where they migrated. If this skull is not giving us any clue, but the tradition of headhunting, the tradition of decorating the head, tradition of hanging those head in the youth dormitory does give us a lot of clue. And these are some of the early administrators who came to Naga Hills and in due course of time become ethnographers, come collector on Naga cultural artifacts. And their writings are almost have become a Bible on Naga cultures. What they saw, they wrote. But behind the writing, there lies a method which they followed to collect the material from Naga Hills to different museums across the Europe. Then let us come to the ethnography. I listed all the limitations which we have if we try to understand the origin of Nagas, but there is still hope. When you go to interiors of Naga Hills, you see the beauty of ethnography. What you are seeing in this slide are the picture of three Ongs. Ongs mean the kings. And in the northern Naga Hills, still this king system is there, chiefdom system is there. And whatever you are seeing, these people are decorated with variety of headgears, necklaces, earlobes, or material made of different kind of beads or metal head. None of this one could buy and wear. All of this one is to acquire by giving either feast of merit or by taking enemy's head with an understanding that enemy head will bring fertility to their village. For an example, what you are seeing in the middle picture, a Ong wearing a necklace which has got 4 heads. That means the Ong has taken 4 heads. The person in the left side and in the center, you can see their face and body are tattooed. Those tattoos are allowed to only heroes of the village, not to the commoners. This is one of the palatial house of a king, and this house, this picture was taken in 2006. When you go there today, this house has got a tin roof instead of a thatch roof now. And what you see in the central pole, this central pole, that is the stands right on the international boundary. And this village is called Langua village. That's the last village of India, and that lies between India and Myanmar. And this pillar, what we have the right to that is India, and left to that is the Myanmar. So that means this house is standing right on the international border. And that pillar, which when you go inside the house, you see this pillar in which the carving is there. The villagers claims this carving to be a 500-year-old carving, and they do say whatever is displayed here, that is the display of their first Naga couple who were getting sermon from their ancestrals. And this is the bed in which tiger is portrayed. And this house is really important to their lifestyle, to their belief, and to their culture system. I went to look for this king grave. The picture I did show you some time back, and I had met him in 1996 and 1999. He expired in 2001. And what is memorial stone? Because by the time he expired, he was already Christian. When I met him for the first time, he was non-Christian. And his grave, what his memory stone talks of, is that is popularly known as Khupa, born in 1923, died in 2001. He succeeded whatever chief of Ang in the village name is Senga. He was a great preserver of his traditional heritage. Remember this line. What he say? He was a great preserver of traditional heritage, survived by four Angyans, 18 wives, 19 sons, 7 daughters, and 59 grandchildren. That it's not like that he had 18 wives, so he was a great preserver of his traditional heritage. Why he was a great preserver of traditional heritage? Because he had brought the fertility to the village by taking the enemy's head, and which allowed him and his family and his followers to ornament themselves with different variety of ornaments which come from very far off places. And that is by who hunted. How he got that right? By hunting 36 heads and ruled his territory in prosperity. That prosperity again is linked to fertility. Despite all his initial oppositions, in his period, his follower hunted 130 heads. He ultimately accepted Christianity and became baptized. Okay. Then I went to look at his grave. Because he was Christian, he was already buried. I had got no option to open the grave and see it. But what I saw is the head which he had collected. Here I am sitting. Head which he had collected, and those head I closely looked at it. They have different perforation all around. So I had got no answer to it. Why this head had so much of perforation? Okay, I leave it at this point of time. But then out of this again, I cannot understand their past that much. Then it comes is that these people, they do go to an extent of taking human heads of different villages by risking their life and for the ornamenting themselves. So what is the importance of the ornament? That it not only fulfill decorative needs, categorize the people, and that is the marker of long distance trade. Probably only commodities reach from far off places. There lies a clue to me. If I start looking at their ornaments, I might be able to understand their origin and migration. And if I look at again with the first slide, I talked about why grave. If I look at the grave goods, then I might understand the origin. Today, those ornaments they collect it, they buy it from Bay of Bengal or Khambat right from the Gujarat, and we do not know from where they were buying earlier, just before the American, because before that there was no communication with Naga Hills. So from where were they getting it? Okay, if I go to Naga Hills today, I look at the Naga, look at their ornament, look at their dress, look at their bead, I can tell you which group they come from. Are they Angami? Are they Semas? Are they, if you look at this, I have titled them, look at these pictures, look at this picture, they're all together different. Both of them are Naga, but the style of wearing and the material they select are different. So the problem started is that taking one material, I cannot conclude them because there are 22 groups, all the 22 groups have their different style of wearing, not only different style of wearing, but different material culture they do use. If Semas put glass, the Angamis make stone. And likewise, if I go to Manipur side, the style is not only glass, but of organic seeds, what we call in Hindi kaincho. Those seeds which are of black and red, and those are seeds. And if I look at the house of central Naga Hills, they use lot of carnelians, and whereas and the style are different. And likewise, you have few wearing even quartz earrings. Okay. So, are we getting all those things with the grapes or no? That was my biggest one. And another group is Konyaks and Wanchos. This Wanchos put you can see the entire console. She must have worn it when she was very young. Now you can remove that console, entire console as the bengal. So how much important they give to their ornament, you can make out from that. And each ornament is the signature that if I'm a Wancho, I should look like this. If I'm a Konyak, I should look like this. And then I went to look at the literature part. When I look at the part of their grave practices, then I start, the first one was a pencil drawing by Gordon in 1897. At the same time, just before that, there was another one in 1882. You see both of them. There was no photography by then in those areas. But you see, what is this? This is a platform burial. In this, what you are seeing, there is a these are bamboos. On the top of that, there's a platform, a dead body is inside, and a covering of palm leaf is there. Then the grave goods, what you will see, is not buried. The grave goods are hanged. And again, the same thing you are seeing in another. This is in the northern, this is in the southern side, and this is in the northern side. And so in the both cases, you see another case, you see the effigy. But this is all pencil. Then you see these grave goods are hanged there. The grave goods are hanged. How long they are hanged? Because body is left it. So for their belief is that the soul remains, the spirit and the soul remains in the head. They've got no importance to body. This body will decompose. After the body decomposes, do you think Nagas were allowing these ornaments, these all are ornaments hanging, to remain there, or they were taken back because the ornaments were so important to them? If that's so, then another reference comes something around 1921. It writes about this is a picture is of Horton of 1921, but description in 1870 it says the Nagas in this particular village bury their dead. The body is placed within a square platform built up of stones about 3 to 4 feet above the ground. Long lines of these close together and rising in steps are to be seen, and frequently inside the village or just outside the road. Occasionally they stand quite alone. Okay, fine. It doesn't talk of anything, but when I looked at a photograph which could match the description, what you see is, if this is the grave goods are hanged there. So if grave goods are hanged there, once this grave decomposes, this grave good will be taken back. The reason is, again, another reference I get is in 1922. This is in Peterbor's Museum, Balfour. Professor Balfour came in 1922. He drew a thing that some of the Nagas, they decompose their body inside the house, the dead, and that is again in a canoe safe. That canoe again it comes reference again and again, and in that when they decompose the body, again there is no grave good to it. And the canoe boat safe coffin used by Lothas, Haos, and Konya Naga is by the Koreans of Burma, Fijians, and Marquis and Simonins of Maros. These all are the community who uses canoe safe. And today, if you go, even such graves are no more. There is no more evidence of smoking the corpses, but you have evidences of burying the corpses inside the house. The same our village where this Balfour had drawn. I had gone to this village. I get the evidences, but they do bury inside. And then again, some of the village is there, since they regard soul is regarded both in the Naga Hills and in the Pacific, needing to have houses built for it or wooden statues representing former body, which it can inhabit after death. Why do they make in that house? Because they believe after death he can inhabit, but the path to the heaven, he would need all these things. But their calculation is that path to the heaven is until the body decomposes, because for them spirit is in the head. The skull is, after the body decomposes, skulls are taken out, and you have these grave goods again hanged. Again, grave goods to the rich are given on the top. It's not inside the grave. It's always on the top of the grave in most cases. And then you have another concept called effigies. These pictures, what you are seeing, they are some of the rare pictures, some of the last picture of open burial, or we call them platform burial, where you bring the dead and hang it on a this is the dead body, is what you are seeing, and then you allow the body to decompose. Once the body decomposes after a month, haphazardly you remove the skull and take the skull. The skull is taken for a secondary burial, because to the skull they do start giving the food or giving the grave goods for years together. In some cases, they take those skull to their granaries also. And with that, there is an effigy. And this is the effigy on which the grave goods are given, the ornaments are given. Again, not to the dead body. If this is the case, these effigies with exposed graves at village of Nianu, such practices were prevalent in also in New Guinea. We have references in Marquis, in Nicobar Island, and in Tonga. And we don't have such effigy reference in Indian side. Then again another set, you see, once the most common way of burial is now extinct. This is a photograph from village Jadua, and another village is photograph of Nigunu. These both of them are Nagas of Arunachal Pradesh. What you see is the open burial system, and open this tree hang to the tree. And where are the grave goods? No answer. And now there are certain cases where graves are in transition. And this is a village in Mitang where you can see the people have become Christian by this time. You can see the cross ring. Still, the tradition, as I told in the beginning, the tradition related to death dies the last. Though they have become Christian, today even the fathers of the church, they don't allow them to practice their tradition related to death. But for a month, the family members do come to near the grave and do talk to the dead for a month. And when they come with their food. They do hang the grave goods here on the top. And or in the effigies, which is not visible in the tree, it is discussed the ornament, those effigies. These ornaments are what the dead had acquired during his life. The spinning of the corpse in village Mitang, such practices again are prevalent among Fijians to keep the flies away, because you keep on fanning the dead for a month or so. And you have evidences of this thread square or women's grave. On the women's grave, the thread squares are again not something very usual in Indian side, but it's usual in things like some parts of Africa, ancient Meru, and other parts of North and South America, Australia, Indonesia, Melanesia, and Polynesians. And in this case, some ethno-cultural objects helps. When we saw the people in their lifetime, they wear elephant tusk on their end, and they do wear a lot of those conch shell ornament as the necklace. But when do they die, were they pouring those as a grave good? Even if there was a grave, even long back in 1939, from the grave, people had collected the replicas of that. Those Nagas were not putting the elephant tusk, but replica made out of wood. It is not something I had collected. It is something an anthropologist called Paul Woods have collected. And it is now in museum in Basel in Switzerland. And you also see replicas in the wooden one way back in 1939. So even if I start looking at the grave, how authentic it is? How do we say as an archaeologist, whatever is found with the grave is what the person had used? It's a big question mark. And these ornaments, even if by colonial period writers, they do describe, and describing the funeral practices of Hattigoria, that mean Aunagas, the person called Woodthorpe in 1882 say all the personal decoration and clothes of the deceased, including the case of a man, his shield, are arranged about the platform or fence. Holes were made in domestic utensils belonging to deceased to render them useless to any might otherwise be tempted to sin. That means there was a tradition of stealing the grave goods also. So even if I start reading the grave goods, I wouldn't know if those grave goods still exist or half of them are being stolen. And this is the same story what you read about Ganguly when you talk about Captain Butler or different time period. They do talk about the same thing, that in some cases this talk, the clothing, the ornaments, weapons are brought back from the graves, symbolically replaced by old and cheaper ones. So even if one starts looking at the grave good, then you do not know if really the things which are offered during death are there or they are replaced buy old and cheaper ones in due course of time. So archaeology needs to be very careful. Okay. Then some of the archaeological, right? These pictures are from Tiyatoshi Jamir, the one of the professor in Nagaland University who have been excavating on Naga Hills for quite some time. And these are two sites which is in the Kifir districts towards Myanmar, and the earliest evidence comes from 4500 BCE. You can see the caves, which is in a very inhabitable region at the moment, and then they have put the trends. Those dates have come to 4500 BCE, but in 4500 BCE we do not get any evidence of ornament. And few sites which I am giving you, and some of the sites which talks of right from 200 before present to we have taken an earlier date of 4500 BC, you find hardly any beads or ornament. Whereas we do identify the Nagas with ornaments, but then archaeological, you get no evidences of that. What is the reason of that? And you do get in few cases only a carnelian bead or a necklaces, a few bead, only one site. This is called Chinglim Miti, which is dated to 1,000 years back, where you start getting number of beads, but of very variety and size, not of uniformity. And this is a site of Jyotsna Cave, where you get even in the dead, this person is interpreted as a warrior because there was evidence of a big spearhead. The spearheads are generally given to warriors, and you have a machete also, but then the evidence you get is only a carnelian bead. So how are you relating that? So and then whereas in the Chinglimiti you do get a number of beads, but this is only 1,000 years old, but none of them, you don't get a necklace, you get variety of beads. Probably they were offering ornaments made of bone and tooth. If so, then the bone and tooth would have survived. If human bones have survived so long, then bone and tooth of animals would have survived long. Those were also not found in the graves. So my difficulty started is now because I'm lacking evidence in archaeology. I'm getting references in historical document, which is rather modern document to our consideration of 1875s, and which talks about people replacing the original grave goods. Then how do I carry out a field work in such a difficult situation? I had already hypothesized to understand the origin of Nagas is most of the Nagas have converted to Christianity for too long to have maintained their tradition. Burial activities take place in front of church officials these days, who discourages offering of ornaments. The death ceremony is an emotional issue, and most people do not like some documenting it. Even in the interior part of Nagaland, wherever the old graveyards are still visible, the Nagas do not entertain the idea of allowing outsider to enter and disturb their spirits. There is always a threat that outsider will steal the expensive grave offering, if any, which of course no Naga would ever dare to take. And finally, it is very, I don't know how to say, my visit needed to coincide with the death ceremony of not of a commoner, but of a chief's family member with whom ornaments are more associated. So with these difficulties, I started doing a little bit of more field work. Then I met a person called Father Vetho. He talked to me about, he showed me one picture which he had taken in 1996 of a king of a village, dead body of a Nokse Wangpang, that is a king, in a kitchen. The dead body was kept in a kitchen for 7 days. His description of Mitong village. And what I see is with the dead, not only this, and this is a picture which he didn't have a picture of entire body. On the head, I start seeing the cell. What for? Because till now, what I have seen the Nagas, the cell concepts are put on the necklaces or waistband or on the hair, but I suddenly start seeing on the head. That's the picture I had. And he was the king. And then I do see the grave goods are again offered on the side of head. Then the question came, I had to look at a real death. So I went around looking at the same village, and in the village of Mitang, I come across two cyst burial. What is cyst grave is that where you have a cyst-shaped graves. And those two cysts, I could see there are a lot of drum on the top and lot of ornaments inside. And I saw, when I peeped in, there are about number of skulls. Then I was not allowed to touch it because both the cysts are of the king. This is for male, and this is for male where there is a gong, and this is for female. And this is the family of the king, this is the family of the queen. And I really couldn't have come back without looking or touching that, without counting that. It was beyond my, because I had spent a decade there to understand this. And when I looked at them very closely, look at it, I start looking at the skulls which have these cells, this cone cell stitched to the skull, and this put it in that way, and I was taken back. And any person who have not understood Naga would take it that this ornament must be of female. No, they are the male. And when I counted the skull, I could convince those village and king of that village that I want to study this, and they did allow with a lot of convincing. And then when I counted, there are 29 skulls in one grave. As I said you, they do believe secondary burial. They do believe the skull holds the spirit. The body has got no importance but the skull. So after the body decomposes on the platform, they take out the skull and put it in this cyst for the secondary burial, and they do decorate the skull. What do? They do make holes on the skull after cleaning it. And what you saw in the past picture, if you remember, I showed you one picture, a stack of skull which had got perforation, which all the time people believed that is a spearhead. Why should that be a spearhead now? That could be because of these practices. And as an archaeologist, if I find it buried, then what would happen is that this copper wire would decompose fast. And when this copper wire starts decomposing, this cell will start falling. Once the cell starts falling, I would get the cells cell outside, and I will get these skulls with lot of perforation. And if somebody doing paleopathology would interpret that altogether different, then the region of death is different than understanding this importance of ethnology. And this is the ancient heroes. And then I do also see with some skull a typical glass bead. The only offering which I find as part of ornament is this tile glass bead. And this tile glass bead with these heads, they are generally given to headhunters. And grave goods as indicator of past trade contact, Hong's family, that is in the village Jadua Pataki. Then I got again confused that why do you put this skull on the head? Okay, I had already clue from this picture, but then I had got no more information. I had only this picture. I looked for some few more here. Then I come to a village called village Longding, where I see today's king. Of course, they've started having cigarette instead of the traditional of him. And then people have started wearing dresses. He is the king of the present day village. When there was some traditional fair going on, he doesn't use it every day. You see how he is decorating himself. The cell on the head, though, that means the way you were ornamented is while you are living, on your death, that's the way you are ornamented. So now, if I look at this, if I would have known how old they are, I would have been able to know the tradition. Okay, now I have to look at this tradition with other communities. And another archaeological importance comes here. The 29 head, that means of 29 generation, it is only head of the king are being buried there. So if I do one AMS date from this grave, it will make me more confusing than answer, because it has got 29. It's about 500-year-old story altogether. Okay. Then, as you saw for the king, that way the commoners also there. They would die. When they die, the commoners, they are given in a pot burial. Their heads are given. Again, council is given. So council is something which is part of their tradition. And from where do the council come from? The nearest, as I said, Bay of Bengal or Rameswaram, down south. So you do not get any other grave goods mostly. And then still now people do make such type of pot for the secondary burial if there is evidence. Then funnily another evidences I could get it is a car as a grave good. Fine. So how do I say this is a traditional grave good which is related to the tradition, and this is not a traditional grave good? This is a village where I was working in Mitong again. There I find a car being given to a grave good to a grave which is only a 7-year-old girl. Why that car was given? Because the Nagas believe the last thing with whom the death was associated, that carries the spirit. This girl was trampled by a PWD truck, and the villagers said this PWD truck should be given to her grave. As you know, the Nagas and the Indian government, there is a class with that, and government agreed. They had got no other option. Okay, you can take this PWD truck as a grave good. The problem started to the cremation ground. When you take the grave to the graveyard, the truck cannot come, because if truck has to come, then it has to come on many graves, because the graves are so close by, and many graves about whom the villagers knew. Then there was some understanding that okay, a 4-wheeler had to be given, so a car came to as a grave good, and this car is now still alive. But then this car has got no association with the Nagas. Even the entire village cannot afford those days, could not have afforded a car. But the spirit, the association of that spirit, where you and I should understand that grave good is not what one uses in lifetime, but a symbol of status these days. The concept of grave good have changed. So studying today's grave good and interpreting the past would be a big flaw. Then another grave I saw of a queen is, which I say, I am gone, buried with tradition. He is gone, she is gone, buried with all the tradition, all the grave goods are there. But then what have you given me is a Swiss watch. Maybe a greedy ethnographer like me would have gone there as a PR thing. They do present that is gone as a grave good. But she misses. What is she missing is that I am missing to be next to my forefathers. I was supposed to be buried with my forefathers. You remember where are the forefathers of her? Her forefathers are unfortunately taken to all the museum across the Europe. You count, they are there. There is no, that's what I said, they are object of curiosity there. That maybe one day it will be reparted. Okay. Then there are possible reasons why beads are not placed with dead, I could say, is that the entry of material culture, which is based on very long distance trade in items such as carnelian from Khambat and glass from Firozabad and Banaras, or from Myanmar on a large scale, may have taken place much later than what we believe. They might have started only after this communication started, because before that we have got no record about Nagas. As you saw in archaeological also, there are only few beads out there. The Nagas who perform platform burial either decorate their graves or hang items over the graves, and once the body decomposes, they take it with. The Nagas, for whom only skull carries value, concentrate more on the secondary burial and offer only the ornaments related to head as grave goods with the skull that you saw. Many of them are concept. And the use of headbands made of Indo-Pacific bead is recent phenomenon, and before they could become part of the traditional grave good, people converted to Christianity. And therefore, their graves too have changed. In the olden days, Nagas' graves were very elaborate, and the offering given were mostly of the ornaments type for the male. And what happens to ornaments is after the death that is inherited. The ornaments of women are inherited by their daughters, and they are often part of the dowry. These dowry ornaments are returned to her parents if she dies childless. Since the ornaments reaches Naga Hills through many middlemen and had to be traded through treacherous areas, sometime at the risk of one's life, the price of the commodity becomes so exceptionally high that people start putting replica of those as a grave goods. Among some communities, the offerings to the dead are placed not only on the grave but also on the outskirts of the village. That has not been studied. The memorial of graves of the war heroes were frequently surmounted by the life-size wooden effigies, what I showed you, which the souls are said to be inhabit temporarily. Ornaments and beads are given to the effigies rather than to the graves. And once the effigies are again, once the body decomposes, effigies are taken for another body. So those ornaments are removed. Among the Konyaks and Wanchos, in some villages, after the dead is detached, the skull is cleaned and put in the village cemetery. Again, the ornaments will not go. In the case of unnatural or violent or drowning death, there is no ornaments or beads are given. So I come to my last slide. There has been no space in this brief account to describe the origin of Nagas. It's a very small picture. Or the speculations of scholars about their early migrations. It has been suggested that the love of marine cells point to bygone settlement near the sea, that the spears with ornamental barbs curling outward from the shaft suggest some relationship with the Igorots and the Philippines island, that they are connected with the Daeks and Borneo through the common tradition of headhunting and platform burials, and with Indonesians generally by the use of simple loin loom. This sort of thing is not very substantial evidence in which to build history of ancient times, but it does give hints of what may have happened. Perhaps the best possible way to approach this issue is to work individually on the aspects of which are last to change. That is the custom associated with the graves and grave goods of such ornaments for each of the possibly related group who could be a clue to their origin, and then compare the findings from our studies. Whatever study I have been carrying out or many Nagas are carrying out, they could do it. Thanks for visiting our village. That as a Naga, though I am not a Naga, but I do say, we welcome you with dance. The moment you go to Nagas, you will see the dance and you will be given a feast of merit, what you are seeing, a food. That's our tradition, and perhaps when you look at my dance, look at my feast of merit tradition, you would know my origin well.